Hey guys, welcome to this study guide video. This study guide video is going to be for the test from 312 to 321. It's going to cover the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, so if you see a question about the Korean War and the Cuban Missile Crisis saying why are they closely related, we know they're related because they wanted to stop communist aggression. That's why the communists were in Korea, the communists were in Cuba, and the United States wanted to stop communist aggression. Sequence of events with the Cold War, what happened first? Well, the first thing that happened was the Communist Revolution in China, and then the Korean War broke out, and then the Cuban Missile Crisis, and lastly, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Take a look if you ever have to read a passage about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are related to the end of World War II, and they help sort of set a new nuclear arms race for the Cold War. So the Korean War and the Vietnam War, why did they happen? Because America was concerned that communism would spread throughout Southeast Asia. That's what we were concerned with. Next, if you see the Berlin blockade, Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Vietnam War, what are all these related to? These are all related to the Cold War. They're all Cold War events. Another thing you need to know, World War II. If you see Nanjing, that was in China when the Japanese destroyed that city. Dunkirk, that was the evacuation of the French when the Nazis kicked the Free French out of France. And Hiroshima, that is obviously the dropping of the atomic bomb in World War II. Those are all related to World War II. How are the Korean War and the Vietnam War similar? They all developed from Cold War tensions. Now, you may also say all these ideas. The French wanted to recolonize Indochina after World War II, and in Vietnam, the French wanted to take over. The United States wanted to stop the spread of communism, and the United States would support the French in Southeast Asia. These are all causes of the Vietnam conflict. Another similarity between the Korean War and the Vietnam War. They were fought as a result of differing political ideologies during the Cold War. That's why they were fought, because communism and democracy, those two political ideologies. So during the Cold War, here are some big events. NATO was made, North Atlantic Treaty Organization for Democratic Countries. The Warsaw Pact was made as an alliance for communist countries. The Berlin Wall was built, separating Germany into communist and a democratic side. And the Cuban Missile Crisis happened when the Russians put nuclear missiles in Cuba. Those are all Cold War events. So, other Cold War events, the Berlin airlift, the Cuban Missile Crisis, nuclear arms race, those are all Cold War events. You need to know those. Main reason the United Nations sent troops to Korea in 1950 was to prevent North Korea from conquering the people of South Korea. The communists in the North were going to take over the democratic South Koreans. In the 1970s to the 1980s, Southeast Asia, after the Vietnam War, what happened? Conflicts developed among communist factions in the area. After the Vietnam War, Vietnam went to war with Cambodia, another communist country. And there are some tensions with the Chinese. So, some current tensions between the United States and Latin American nations have resulted from earlier U.S. policies of the Cold War. The division of Korea in 1945 and the division of Vietnam in 1954 were decisions that worked out as a political compromise to problems of the Cold War. What statement best describes South Korea since the end of the Korean War? South Korea has developed into an industrial powerhouse. South Korea has a very strong economy. The experiences of the United States and Vietnam, basically during the Cold War, powerful nations cannot always force their will on others, just like the Soviet Unions couldn't force their will on the Afghan people during the 1980s. You can't just force a people to become a democracy, like we failed to make Vietnam a democracy and the Soviets failed to make Afghanistan communist. Major results of the Vietnam War. North and South Vietnam were reunited. Vietnam's now all communist and it's one country. Another thing, why did the U.S. get involved in Vietnam? And the United States' involvement in Vietnam and the Soviet Union's involvement in Afghanistan were motivated as a desire to support governments that would remain strong allies. That's why we wanted to fight in Vietnam. We wanted the Vietnamese to be democratic. The Soviets, why did they fight in Afghanistan? They wanted the people of Afghanistan to be communist. And lastly, NATO, the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Korean War, they're all attempts to prevent the spread of communist power. Watch this a few times. Good luck on the test, everybody.